The Capitals down the Blackhawks.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen or view of the day. Yes, this podcast is also available in video form, so head on over to YouTube and check it out. My name is Dan Holney. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about your Caps as they take down the Blackhawks in a decisive fashion by a score of 6-1. This is exactly what the doctor ordered. As we know, the Caps have dropped a game against St. Louis, Minnesota, and Columbus. We'll talk about that in the show. Then later in the show, we will talk about how John Carlson's return was responsible for the Capitals' victory tonight. Make no mistake about it. And then in the last segment, we will talk about what lies ahead for this team. But just to get going, again, this is exactly what the doctor ordered for this Caps team to win in a decisive fashion. And what was their keys to success? Getting on the scoreboard first. They did it in the last game. They did it tonight, and they found a way to actually follow through and play a complete game. And just an all-around great game for the Caps as they get on the board first. We saw Sherry got that kind of gift goal as Khudobin was kind of missed past the puck, and he took opportunity of it. I'm sure Khudobin felt horrible about it. But Sherry made good on it, and it started the Caps off with momentum in the right way. And one of the things I guess I'm going to talk about is this game was, a good victory for the Caps, the team. But it was also a big win for the fan base as well. Before the game, I saw all different kinds of pictures and videos about showing that Capital One Arena was sparsely filled, shall we say. What didn't look like it did, in years before. There was a lot of empty seats, shall we say. And that was one of the feathers that the Caps had in their hat for the longest time, was that all these sold out games. It definitely wasn't the case tonight, but wins like this tonight in DC definitely will help, Caps fans get more back into it. I know we're a little bit late in the season, a little long in the tooth here, but a victory is a victory, and it's not over until it's over. Capitals blow up the lowly Blackhawks as John Carlson tallies 2 points in his return from a 36-game absence, and Darcy Kuemper stepping up big, stops 27 shots for the win. Just a big game all around for the Caps. And one thing I'm going to say, and I'll talk about John a little bit later in the show, is this team plays that much better. One of the things you're going to say, well, I mean, how much of a difference can one guy make? A huge difference. That back end was solidified, and the Capitals played that much better. One of the things they talked about is that Sandin is more of a passer. He's not a shooter, where what they were saying that John Carlson is a 50-50 passer and shooter. So just kind of the best of both worlds. And Peter Laviolette in the pregame presser was saying just the guys like John Carlson don't grow on trees. So he is, truly a 4-leaf clover on this team and a really special piece to their success. It makes you kind of wonder where this team would be right now had he not missed all those games. But the past is the past, and it was just a great all-around win tonight. With a 6-1 victory over Chicago tonight, the Caps have now earned at least 1 point in 11 straight home games against the Blackhawks, dating back to January 10th, 2006. And, it is a lowly Blackhawks team. Make no mistake about it, but a win is a win. They found a way to lose a game to the lowly Blue Jackets team. And one of the things that they pointed out is that this Chicago Blackhawks team still has a lot of fight in them. They beat the Boston Bruins not long ago, and I want to say it was the Dallas Stars. It's some of these teams that you underestimate a trap game. We've all heard about trap games where you go in to play a team that is perceived to be that much less than you, and then you just get stomped. Luckily for the Caps, that wasn't the case, and I think they felt it. I think they kind of looked around and they saw that, all the fans that were normally there weren't there. And, maybe those fans trickled in after. I didn't see any pictures of that, but I think that that was a big thing for the team and everything overall, and just the engagement from Alex Alexiev, who kind of did a tailor-made hip checks, kind of similar to what Dmitry Orlov used to do. Just really impressive. And the thing that you can really appreciate about that hip check from Alexiev is the timing has to be spot on in order for it to be delivered effectively. It kind of, reminds me back of a similar, I guess it was a hip check where it was Alex Ovechkin on PK Subban all those many years ago. So if you can execute that, kind of the same way that Dmitry Orlov did, it's very impressive. And Alex Alexiev looked very impressive as he pulled off that move, but it wasn't just him. That Caps team tonight was all collectively pulling on that rope. They know what it means, that their season could be done much earlier than anyone thought if they don't continue to win games. Listen, it's not over until it's over. They are not eliminated. And I know what people are saying at me, and I hear it all the time on Twitter and YouTube. Dan, it's over. Just give it up. It might be over, but as of right now, it's not over yet. And this team has it within them. They're winners on this team. And I think to a certain extent, this team fed on John Carlson's return to this team. He's just a real stabilizing force. And you really saw that team just exude confidence tonight. And that's what it's all about. The Capitals are 9-0-1 this season when Alexei Protas records a point. Kind of an interesting stat that I read there. So Protas, a guy that's kind of been yo-yoed up and down between Washington and Hershey, just a guy I think in years to come. We know about Alexei Protas. He came to this team in the preseason in camp. I don't think there was any goals for him to be on the regular team, but he played so well that they couldn't afford to take him out of the lineup. And, to be honest, he's kind of had a so-so season, but he seems to be kind of turning on the Jets later in the season, just the right time, if you ask me. Over their last 5 games, the Capitals have converted on 7 of 16 power play opportunities. That's 43.8% if you're doing math at home, and have killed off 11 of 12 opposing power plays, which is 91.7%. It's the little things, and not even little things. It's making the most of power play opportunities, because that was one of the bugaboos. That was one of the sticking points of this Capitals team earlier in the year, is they weren't able to do that. So they're finding a way to do it. The Capitals got off to a strong start for the second straight game, scoring twice in the first period. And, I'm not trying to diminish anything, but I think Khudobin was a little out of sorts. I think he was a little rusty. I mean, his helmet was still painted Dallas Stars green, for God's sake. But I think that he did kind of find his way a little bit later in the game. But a win is a win, and just a really strong outing by the Capitals out there. Ovechkin extended his point streak to 6 games. Ovi scores his 41st goal of the season to extend the Caps lead 6-1. Ovechkin has scored 4 goals in his last 3 games and has 8 goals in his last 10 games. Ovi and John Carlson and Oshie and everyone just pulling on this rope. Are you excited? Capitals fans, let's hear it. And I know where they're at in the standings right now, so don't at me about it. I mean, if you're going to be negative about, the game against the Blue Jackets, I want everyone to be positive about a win tonight, despite who they were playing. It was the Blackhawks, who were one of the worst teams in the NHL. I get that, but a decisive victory. They didn't back into victory. It was 6-1. And it'll be interesting to see, and I'll talk about that later in the show, if they have it in the tank to take down the Pittsburgh Penguins. But I am riding high on this victory. Nicklas Backstrom scores his 6th goal of the season to extend the Caps lead to 4-0. Backstrom has recorded 4 points, 2 goals, 2 assists in his last 5 games. And this was a guy that wasn't supposed to be back until the end of this season, or perhaps the beginning of next season. And he came back in January and has killed it. Like I talked about with Matt Weidrich in the last show, he's been getting kind of moved around a little bit. So when I saw them play against the Wild in person there, you could, sense a little bit of disjointed nature, but ultimately the stat sheet shows he's doing a good job. So Nicklas Backstrom engaged, Ovi engaged, John Carlson engaged. I'm going to have you guys pumping your fist by the end of the show. Just keep with me here. And just an all around great performance out there. It was Mantha's second goal in 2023 and number 11 overall on the season. It was also his first goal since back-to-back healthy scratches. Is this the sign of an Anthony Mantha that's engaged? Do you think that all the lecturing and the talking and the getting scratched by Peter Laviolette, do you think this is finally absorbing in for him and thinking, I've got to make the most of my opportunity? I don't know what my future is with the Capitals. I want to make sure that I actually have at least a future in the NHL. And I think that's what it's about for Anthony Mantha right now. I don't think he's out of the woods. I don't think he's fully endeared himself to the Capitals and the GM and that kind of thing. But I think at the end of the day, he is trying to do what he can do, and that is help contribute on this team. He also had a little bit of physicality out there in the game tonight, which is ultimately what the Caps have always wanted out of him. So just a really, really great all-around win for the Caps, and I am most excited. But the big thing for the Blackhawks, and I ultimately know that they're in the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. It's about that, and I know it's hush hush, don't talk about it, but it's a thing. You take a look at Anaheim, you take a look at the Blue Jackets, you take a look at the Blackhawks. They are all just beside themselves trying to get Connor Bedard, who is considered a generational player. We haven't seen a guy like Connor Bedard come by in quite some time, ostensibly. So, I mean, when I say ostensibly, I guess it depends on how that translates to the NHL. All signs point that he's going to be one heck of a player, but the Blackhawks went 0 for 5 on the power play in their third straight loss. It's got to be a tough thing for them to go through all this. I mean, I can even talk about the Caps just watching them. I am not used to watching a Capitals team that doesn't make it to the playoffs, at least. So if for some reason they don't make it to the playoffs, it's going to be kind of a tough pill to swallow. And Darcy Kuemper in beast mode stopped 27 shots in his return from an upper body injury. Another big thing. So we get Carlson back, we get Kuemper back, and we Kuznetsov was, feared to be injured, and Oshie has been kind of in and out. This is kind of like the culmination of a perfect storm. A lot of these guys were injured in the beginning of the season, but now they're starting to get healthy. This could mean that this team could go on a heater. Is it going to be enough for them to earn a wild card spot? That is the question, and that is, the question of the day. I am most excited about it, and what this team can do. If they could pick up a win against the Penguins on Saturday, all bets are off. I think anything is possible. All right, so after the break here, we are going to talk about the return of John Carlson and what he means to this team. It was noticeable. Let's talk about John a little bit more after the break. The tournament is heating up, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. That's because right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back if your bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/locked-on and sign up to claim your no-sweat first bet. Then you can wager on everything from the money line to point spreads to which team will be cutting down the net, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So don't miss your shot at a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel.com today. Just go to FanDuel.com/locked-on to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So one of the biggest pieces that was added, instrumental for the Caps win tonight, make no mistake about it, was the return of John Carlson. And he missed a substantial amount of time because we know he took that slap shot off the face from Dylan at 90 miles per hour. He slashed that artery and it fractured his skull. Just a really scary moment. And even scarier was to start the game. He took that stick up high, and I'm like, oh my God, you've got to be kidding me. But he just kind of adjusted his helmet and he was good to go. And like I talked about earlier, was one of the things that Locker was talking about, is just a real good two-way defenseman, not just a shooter, not just a passer. He's the best of both worlds. And John Carlson was engaged. And it seems like the blue line and the defenseman kind of just fell into their places. And, he is a stabilizing force because he's been there. He's done that. And it was Faravari and Carlson back working together the way they should have been, Sandin and Jansen, and then Alexiev and TVR. Scratches for the night were Irwin and Abe Kubel. And, not to say anything disparaging about Irwin, but it seems like Alexiev is really kind of proving to himself and everyone else that he belongs here and just has really done a great job for the Caps in his time, made the most of it. Carlson said he needed a few shifts to get comfortable in the first game since taking a slap shot to the face on December 23rd. He skated for 20 minutes playing on the top pairing and top power play unit after a 36-game absence, kind of the quarterback out there on the power play. And it's interesting the power play was really humming along tonight, isn't it? The 33-year-old Carlson said he hadn't been that nervous for a game in a long time. The first shift, a puck came around and I had to poke check it and it kind of came up. So what was probably not the most ideal of starts that you would want, he said, it definitely felt a little wild. It was special to be back out there. It feels good. And it was noticeable having John Carlson, like I said, out there, just a real solid stabilizing force for that team and just contributing right off the bat there. John Carlson scores his 9th goal of the season on the power play to extend the Caps lead to 5-0. Carlson has recorded 2 points, 1 goal, 1 assist in his first game since December 23rd, making his 6th multi-point game of the season and 140th of his career. So to say that he's noticeable would be a bit of an understatement. He came out there and he just everything settled down. That was the big takeaway from this game, is that everything kind of fell into its place, like putting on an old pair of shoes or a glove or something. It just was a hand in glove situation, and it felt like and it looked like a Caps team that we've seen for so many years. And, I don't want to get ahead of myself and say that it's going to be like that in the next game because, if history's any lesson, they may fall flat on their face, especially against the Penguins. But for right now, in the moment that I'm living in right here, I'm happy about the performance tonight. And I'm hoping that they can get another performance like that on Saturday as well. But there were so many questions that were about the Caps blue line and the future therein. They picked up Rasmus Sandin from the Maple Leafs, who was never really able to find his way there, kind of on the third pairing. He has stepped up offensively. He's choked a little bit defensively, but ultimately I think that's something that can be fine-tuned. And then the loss of Dmitry Orlov is something that it's kind of coming into focus as well. I think the Caps really miss him out there. And he's killing it for the Boston Bruins. So a real loss for the Caps, kind of just reflecting back on the trade deadline and all that was there. And ultimately it would have been good to have Dmitry Orlov come back, right? But it just wasn't going to happen. And I'm going to have to get over it. And Caps fans are going to have to get over it because he wanted a 7-year deal. Caps were in on 3. But the good news is John Carlson, we got him. He is a guy that's going to be under contract next year. And just what I've noticed from him tonight is just, again, a solidifying force out there. Just kind of the whole blue line just fell into line when he was in there. And just a really great game for John Carlson in his return, and a great game in general for the Capitals. They have not had a game that kind of was just this moral boost, I guess, that I could say in quite some time. And, a win where they got the lead early and they kept the lead. They never, relented. They never took their foot off the gas, and it showed as they won in a decisive fashion. All right, so after the break here, we are going to talk about the road ahead and the games ahead and what are the Capitals' odds of doing anything. We'll talk about it after the break. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So in this next segment here, we are going to talk about the Caps' hopes for the playoffs and what lies ahead. And, ultimately, should they even be, even planning for the playoffs? Is it even a tangible thing out there? Just kind of taking a look at the standings and where they slide in. Their chance of even making it to the playoffs is quite remote. The last I saw on Money Puck here, which I know isn't the above all end all, has the Capitals making the playoffs at 0.0 7%. So it is a bit daunting out there. But I mean, what is Money Puck? That's just like a betting type a tool to use if you happen to bet on games. Do I think that it is impossible? No. Do I think it's improbable? Yes. So I don't think it's impossible, but I think that it's probably improbable that they're going to make it to the playoffs. But I don't want to count them out yet, as they found a way to kind of rally the troops tonight and find a way to pick up a big win. So next is the Pittsburgh Penguins. Next week, big games against the Islanders and the Tampa Bay Lightning. Not going to be easy games. And I'm going to be honest with you. I know the Penguins are not the Penguins of old, but the New York Islanders are a team that is, kind of making some waves out there. And it's going to be interesting to see if they're going to, be in the mix. I ultimately think that the Islanders are pretty much locked in there unless they totally fall flat on their face. But this was before the game here. The Caps had 76 points, the Penguins 80, and the New York Islanders 82. So it is interesting out there. There's certain things that could fall into place. It depends on how the other players, other teams that are vying for that position as well. So just taking a look at it, it is the Islanders and Pittsburgh in the wild card spot. Florida with 79 points and Washington with 76. So again, we're hoping that Florida can kind of fall flat on their face and the Capitals can keep winning. That's all you can ultimately do at the end of the day, is just try to win the game that's in front of you. And one of the things that FP Santangelo, former broadcaster for the Nationals, said, try to go 1-0 every day. That's the way you got to look at it. You got to be victorious game in, game out. Don't have your eyes too far to the horizon. Just keep your eyes at the task at hand. And the task at hand is they're playing the Penguins on Saturday. So that is their mission ahead, and it is not going to be an easy game. The Islanders game is not going to be easy either, and we ultimately don't want them to be easy. I hear all the time, well, these are going to be tough games, because then I peel the calendar over here into April. It's the Rangers, and then they got Montreal, which should be one of those win games, Florida Panthers, and then to close out the season. Can you believe we're talking about closing out the season already? The week of the 9th through the 15th on Monday, the Islanders, then it's Boston, and then to close out the regular season, it is going to be the New Jersey Devils. It's not going to be easy. And why do I say I don't want it to be easy? Because if you have any plans at all of making it to the playoffs, you're going to have to beat the really good teams. And, again, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I think that this is kind of the culmination of potentially, ostensibly, a perfect storm. Carlson back, Kuemper back, Ovechkin dialed in, Oshie dialed in. I mean, all we would need is Connor Brown to come back, and it would be just like this team from the beginning of the season. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but for right now, for me, as a Caps fan, as a guy that hosts this show for you guys, I am positive about this team as they pick up a decisive victory and just kind of let the cards fall where they may about the future. But for right now, I'm kind of just pretty happy about the way everything has gone. So thank you for making Locked On Capitals your first listen today. Now make your second listen Locked On Game to Game NHL, every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game across the NHL with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Locked On Game to Game NHL, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you find your podcasts. And guys, I know I do this podcast and I talk to you about the Capitals, but I would love to talk one-on-one Caps with you, like texting back and forth. You can do that with subtext. Just check the show notes or the show description and follow the link. That way we can talk about, summer activity and where I think the Capitals will finish next year, those kind of things. It would be so much fun. And also, when you're using your podcatcher of choice, whether it be Apple, Spotify, Stitch, or whatever, hit that follow or subscribe button. That way you will know when the new podcasts are available. Then when you're done, head on over to YouTube. Same thing, hit that subscribe button. We're at around 460 subscribers. Let's get it up to 500. I have you guys to thank. All right, once again, thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.